Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine War news update for the 19th of June 2023. I've got my tea, I've got the team. What else do I need? Let's go on. Well, last in peace in Ukraine, I guess. Let's get on with it. Not I guess, I definitely would like. Right, let's get to where we normally start. The Ukraine General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. Some pretty interesting big numbers posted in certain categories. 630 liquidated personnel. It's about where it's been for the last few days. 5 tanks, 6 APVs, armored personnel vehicles, IFVs, APCs, so on and so forth. So that's a downtick from previous days in those categories. 18 artillery systems is a big number. Pretty sizable. There's a continued explicit targeting of artillery systems in these, well, pretty much everywhere, but particularly the southern front line, the Zaporizhia Oblast and the southern Donetsk Oblast. One helicopter, I think that's the 5th or 6th helicopter in the last week. It's just an incredible number for helicopters being lost. Think about the crews, think about the expense of those helicopters. However, they do have quite a few helicopters, and they are using them to some decent effect on those that southern front line. Uh, the more that you use them, the more you're putting them in harm's way, I guess. So they will lose helicopters if they are going to use them, and yeah, that is what's happening. So another helicopter lost there, 12 drones, and then we have 42 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 4 pieces of special equipment. The Ukrainians have really been hammering logistics, and we'll go on to this a little bit later. I've got a whole tab group of targets being hit, logistics targets. It's just they have absolutely hammered Russian logistics. Okay, let's move on. We're going to go. Yep, there's that helicopter, another K-52 attack helicopter shot down. Don't know exactly where, but that will be on the southern front line, I would have thought. And then we're going to go on to look at this. So there's a few things coming out, and this chap, Margot Grosberg, from the who is he? Is Estonian intelligence, isn't he? So he has ISW has reported on what he is saying. There are some rumors that the Ukrainians might have taken an operational pause in the counter-offensive, that they might have not stopped it, but you quite often do operational pauses to regather your senses, reconstitute, have a look, regroup, have a look around, see what the situation is, and then go from there. Sort of replan, adjust to any challenges that might popped up. That could just be a bit of psyops to fool the Russians into thinking that Ukrainians aren't going to attack for a week and then suddenly they attack. So I don't really know. Or it could be that actually the Ukrainians are really quite suffering in this counteroffensive. They're coming up against stiffer resistance than they were anticipating. It could be that as well. All of these options are still out there. If we look at the Oryx numbers, so these are the visually confirmed losses for both sides. We have the Russians taking 26 pieces of equipment, quite a variety: tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, logistics trucks. Not too much evidence here of the huge array of self-propelled guns actually that I have seen. There's lots of visual evidence of these SPGs being hit, so I don't know why they are missing off that list. And then the Ukrainians have 19 in total. Again, fairly similar sort of list actually to the Russian list. So if this is an accurate representation, of course, this is just a one-day snapshot. So, and these figures have kind of been all over the place. But if this is a kind of snapshot that reflects what is accurately going on the front lines, then you can see that 26 Russian losses to 19 Ukrainian losses. The Ukrainians are losing almost as many as the Russians, which you kind of expect on an attack. They're on the offensive. They're going to be throwing their mechanized equipment into the fray in a way that the Russians probably won't be. They'll be relying on artillery, sitting back, soaking up the offensive with mines and, as I say, artillery and aerial munitions. So that is, I guess, par for the course, but I don't know if that's at all representative. Right, here's a Russian self-propelled howitzer. The reason I've included this is because that wasn't in that list, and there's so much footage of these SPGs, pieces of artillery that have been taken out, which is, as understood, in the general staff figures, these are being lost. And we've got the triangulation, I guess, of the visual confirmation from footage like this and general staff figures, but not recorded on Oryx. So we may see that again. And then, is it on this bit of footage? I was wondering if it was going to be this footage where. No, it was just music. Who knew? There was a one bit of footage I thought was that. It might. No, it's not this one. Okay, where there's some piece of special equipment that was lost, some ISR stuff that I was going to just point out to you, but it's a different piece that I haven't got here. Now, this is some quite incredible footage, actually. T-64BV of the Ukrainian 35th Marine Brigade attacking the Storozhova area survived two PG-7VR tandem heat RPGs. One missed, the other hit. I don't know. They both looked to have hit to me. Hit the reactive arm on the side of the tank, damaging it. All the crew were okay, and the tank is being repaired. This goes to show how important ERA is, reactive armor, and there you see that hitting. Actually, that's the one that must have missed then, and there's that hits the ERA, exploded, and yeah, it's just incredible slow motion footage there to show that. So that must have just missed. So they are quite right there. And yeah, it goes. I guess the RPGs, something like that, will be able to be fended off with ERA and the armor of the tank more readily, especially if it's not hitting it from the rear, more readily than something like an ATGM, anti-tank guided missile, your javelins and NLAWs and things like that, especially if they're top down. Your tank wouldn't be left standing there. And what does that say about the capabilities the Russians have in attacking pieces of equipment like this from the ground, from their infantry? Do they have enough ATGMs and so on and so forth? Right, this is a significant piece of news, and this has done the rounds. This has been admitted by a number of Russian sources. So a Russian commander and 300 of its fighters died in Pyatikatki. So Pyatikatki was this village that I've reported over the last couple of days that the Ukrainians have fought long and hard to take, and they've taken it. Russian deputy commander of the Stormer Setia Battalion, Tekov Avengo, died in Pyatikatki. Russian sources claim that along with him, almost an entire battalion of 300 fighters died during recent fights for the small village. Sort of thing that we're seeing on Russian Telegram channels and so on and so forth. Although, okay, right. So basically, this has happened. There's lots of reporting that there are claims that these guys were surrounded in Pyatikatki and were basically eliminated there. So 300 of these guys, perhaps, and a deputy commander of the battalion. So there's a really, really big loss. Then there are claims, and actually it might be around this bit of footage. So we have some KAMAZ Ural truck, military truck being hit, and there are three kind of rumors going around about this. One, it's just Ukrainians hitting Russian stuff. Two, it's those people from this battalion running away, or some of them escaping and being hit by barrier troops. There's another rumor about this footage. And another one is that a bunch of Ukrainians were in Russian military gear, like a special operation, and which we talked about perfidy previously, and about whether that's a war crime to wear the uniform of the other side, which it is, or it's against the Geneva Convention. Now, one rumor is that this was a bunch of Ukrainians in Russian military uniform that was taken out by Russians. Anyway, just to let you know that footage has been explained in three very different ways. Here's one of those rumors. Fleeing Ossetians stopped by so-called blocking forces. So Ossetia is like Transnistria is to Moldova. South Ossetia is to Georgia. It's like an annexed area of Georgia that the Russians have under their control, sort of, and they're creeping, it seems, each year in like the border goes a little bit further. Today came the tragic news of the whole of for the whole of South Ossetia during the war. The deputy commander of the battalion, Storm Ossetia, Tekov Ivano, he left like a real fighter and a brave warrior. Together with a unit, he was surrounded in the locality of Piatikatsky in the Zaporizhia region direction. None of the fighters retreated and decided to stand to the last, and as a result, almost the entire battalion was killed. Eternal memory to the heroes. We express our condolences to the families and relatives of the fighters of Storm Ossetia, a Storm Unit Ossetia, a battalion, a whole battalion. How is it? It's from 300 plus people. Technic, nightmare, just hell. Where was the support of our artillery and our aces from the air? It's totally effed up. Uh, so this guy is saying another explanation is that they were stopped by the. It doesn't say it in that Russian piece of text there, but this is a Ukrainian source saying another explanation. It could be the blocking forces there. So as I say, there's a number of different explanations for that. For that imagery. Right, let's move on. Russians have turned a tank, and this is done. The mainstream media have reported on this quite a bit. So Russians have turned a tank into a remotely controlled SVBIED by filling it with 6 tons of explosives and sending it against Ukrainian positions near Mariinka. Now, the TASS news agency reported on it, and I showed you footage of them filling up a MTLB with that sort of an APC with explosives, so that this is something they are doing. This, I think, was a T-54, T-55 vehicle, reached the Ukrainian lines, or it failed to reach the lines as it struck a mine and then was hit by an RPG. Now, this footage is quite astounding because this is what that much explosives does when it explodes. Okay, so the tank gets stuck in a field hitting a mine, and then we're just going to come to it later. It's quite a long video, and then it's struck with a ATGM, and the explosion is absolutely huge. So this is where the Ukrainian lines are, and you can see, whoa, the ATGM coming out from the right there. I'll show you that again. Just watch the tree line to the right. So it's quite close to the Ukrainian lines. It almost got there and then got disabled. And then bang. That is a massive explosion. Couple of waves of, a couple of shock waves there, one after the other. So that has been in the news quite a bit. The Russians have tried it. Obviously, didn't work on that occasion. Other news and losses in the hits: a car carrying the deputy prime minister of Zaporizhia region exploded in Simferopol. It is reported that the gas cylinder exploded in the car. The official, as well as his secretary and bodyguards, suffered severe burns. So there's quite a bit of partisan activity taking place. Russians have been hitting Kherson. Here, actually, 10 buses apparently have been taken out. There's quite a lot of destruction in Kherson, and there in a car park there are 10 buses that were taken out. Right, we're going to go on to, I've separated it out to give me more space. Going to go on to sort of distance hits here. So Russian sources claim the headquarters of their 80th Brigade was hit. So there is a claim that up to 12 officers have been hit here. This is, the Russians claiming this. So that is quite significant for them. I'm not sure exactly where that is. There's been some claims around the southern front lines and Mikhailivka, so on and so forth. Now, I showed you yesterday how there's a big explosion just north of Henichesk. This is this area here. If I show you on the map, this map. So it's Rykova, just north of Henichesk. This was a huge explosion. I mean, really, really big. So the explosions went on for 6 hours. So I'll read this. So big Ukrainian channel, Nikolaevsky Vanek says a military stockpile that went up in the air today in Rakova, South Kherson, was fully loaded with ammo and has been used to supply the Russian Zaporizhia group. It's been used for months and was guarded by special forces, including Akhmat, so the Chechen special forces. He says at least 52 died as a result of the explosions and fire that took place over 6 hours. So this was a massive massive set of explosions that just went on and on, loads of secondary explosions. It was a huge depot, and actually, this is really, really problematic for the Russians. I mean, so basically, satellite imagery just showed this is completely destroyed. This is an area just near the railway station. We already knew that Reykjavik was an important logistics center for the Russian army, but the results of the destruction leave no doubt that it was a primary logistics center containing thousands of tons of ammunition and fuel. An event of this magnitude will have more impact on the battlefield than a battalion of destroyed armored vehicles, and they are by far singular. They are by far singular events. Russian logistics centers have been recently leveled in Melitopol, Tokmak, Berdyansk, Lazerna, and Skadovsk, and probably even more cities. So this, you can see that the surrounding buildings around here were also absolutely hammered by the explosions that took place. It might well have taken the railway out as well. I don't know, but it is absolutely huge. This, and people are saying, saying as much. It is really significant hit that. Then Zaporizhia, more explosions in the oblast. This time Mikhailivka, once again about 50 kilometers north of Melitopol. I wonder if one of these, yeah. So you got Mikhailivka, which is I think slightly this side, sort of on the way down from Vasilivka. Now there have been talks about. I told you there's a command post that's been taken out. A reporting from Ukraine was saying that one of these strikes, and it might have been the Mikhailivka one, was resulted in 170 Russian deaths or casualties, which is again a massively significant hit. So it's almost like these hits do more damage to the Russians than what's taking place on the front line. And so if the Ukrainians are taking an operational pause, but they continue doing stuff like this, then the end result might actually be pretty much the same or even better. Don't waste your troops like losing them here. Just hammer the area with artillery continually. Just absolutely flatten the front lines, and then continue to take out these places behind the front lines with Storm Shadow and just wreak all sorts of havoc. This is a photo from Tokmak, said to the command post of Russia's invaders in the Zaporizhia region. So that I don't know whether that is that command post or not. I'm just unsure. There's just so many places being hit at the moment. And then we move on to Russia. In the Volodar district of Bryansk, a hospital being built for veterans is on fire, Russian media reports. I don't know if it's under construction, but that was a huge fire. There's some really significant footage that came out of that one in Bryansk. And then in Belgorod Grivoron, which was attacked at the end of May by the Russian Volunteer Corps and the Freedom Russia Legion. That is being attacked again. No further details. I don't know if that is attacked by shelling or on the ground. In the Kursk region, again in Russia, there were explosions and a fire in a warehouse with fuel and lubricant materials. Locals report there are power outages. So again, it's just these kind of hits and fires are happening so often in Russia. This is another huge looking fire in Moscow. So in southeast Moscow, Kuzminki district, a workshop of the central mechanical repair plant is on fire. The four-story building was undergoing some renovations, maybe careless smoking. There is a small chance of sabotage as well. There's various footage of that from different directions as well, showing it is a pretty significant fire going on there. Right, let's go to the sort of odds and sods and see what we have. Here we have the UN not being able to help the people on the left bank of the Kherson region after the Kokhovka hydroelectric power plant was blown up, because Russia again rejected the request for access to the territories occupied by it. Quote, the government of the Russian Federation has so far rejected our request for access to areas currently under its temporary military control, which means that Russia doesn't want help in helping technically their own people, right? This is an annexed region. This is now officially part of Russia. As their soldiers there, supposedly they're civilians, especially since they're being forced to have Russian passports, and yet they're doing the square root of NAFL to help them. And the UN has said, "Okay, look, can we help?" And Russia said, "No." Like if that is what liberation looks like, gee whiz! Just sorry, I'm starting to get annoyed. But and at the same time, there's video footage now coming out of the Ukrainian army saving the Russian army in after the flooding. Was when some Russian occupiers blew up the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant dam, they forgot about the other Russian occupiers holding positions on the Dniepro's left bank. Ukrainian Navy SEALs saved enemy soldiers from drowning and added them to the POW exchange fund. Just, yeah, insane. There's been lots of many accounts of the Ukrainians helping the Russians, or no, sorry, helping the Ukrainians on the other side of the Dnipro, dropping them food and water with drones. Some of the smaller drones dropping water through windows, and the larger drones dropping whole packages for people to use. And the Russians appear to be doing nothing to help those in the occupied region. Just to add to the list of war crimes, we know that castration has taken place previously, but apparently it seems to be an organized castration. There's quite a few news articles talking about how the Ukrainian POWs are being there's an organized castration. Basically, it's yeah, it's not just your one-off crazy person doing something to a Ukrainian POW. This seems to be going on. There's a Times article here that I might dip into for an extra, although it's pretty horrific subject matter. Andrei Yermak in the Wall Street Journal. One of the Ukrainian leaders there said that there would be no negotiations with the Russian Federation while their army was on the territory of Ukraine, and Russia should not expect any territorial concessions either. War to victory, which is pretty strong language from the Ukrainians. Now, I'm just going to mention this not because of the story itself. I mean, the story itself is that these retired pair have been in Ukraine for a year, and they were sent a letter by, was it Lloyds Bank or Barclays? One of them sent them a letter saying, can you fill out this form or something? They didn't reply because they're in Ukraine, and so they shut their bank account down. And these guys are like, we need that bank account in Ukraine. This is money that we are using. They're using their money to help buy packages for Ukraine. So anyway, this hit the news. But what was interesting for me was a couple of things. First of all, these guys had retired and then gone over to Ukraine for a year to help Ukrainians. I'm sure this is one of many examples of this happening. Just fantastic. Like people giving up, stopping their lives, putting their lives on hold. They could be sitting back in a garden, the summer's coming on, this is a beautiful time of year, and yet they are out in Ukraine helping other people for the good of the world. Just fantastic when people do that. But oh yeah, it's Lloyd's. But what was interesting in reading this article is just a little throwaway sentence, which is which is their house that they left back in Lancashire. Fun fact: I used to live in Lancashire. Is being inhabited by two Ukrainian families. Yeah, here it is. So life here is unbelievably difficult, and we have earmarked a £5,000 that was in the account, also in the account, to help fund the next bit of work here. Every time we do a run to collect an aid package, it costs around £300, and we desperately need that money, the couple said via a WhatsApp call. Hancock added, only after I emailed the Lloyds media team and was I emailed a letter explaining what had happened. It seems they have sent a check with the balance to my UK home, which is currently housing two Ukrainian families, but that's no good to me here. So Lloyds closed their account down, sent them the check, but they're not living there. And in fact, two Ukrainian families living there. So it's like, not only have they gone to Ukraine to help the Ukrainians, but they've given their house to two Ukrainian families. Absolutely brilliant. And that's what I took out of this story. Nothing really to do with the bank and whatever. So, kind of like meh, as in like, it's annoying, but marginally interesting. But these people just seem like just the sort of people that we should celebrate. Fantastic. Okay, great update here from Brady Afric. So Brady Afric is a guy who's doing the mapping of the defensive lines that the Russians have built, and again, further showing the defensive lines being built around Tokmak, and then on the way out of Tokmak to the settlements to the kind of northeast. and you can see that there are substantial trench lines built right across fields, right around settlements. This is why the counteroffensive is going to be and is being difficult. Uh, these aren't, you know, things that you can just hand wave away and say, well, we've got the capability of being able to breach these defenses. We've got this kind of vehicle and that kind of vehicle. Yeah, but if those vehicles are getting hit as they're doing their work, or hit before they even get there, or even in getting there, you still have to, you know, do lots and lots of work before you send those breaching vehicles in, and it's just going to be super expensive in terms of time and resources. Yeah, I believe that the defenses are more of a challenge than possibly some people have given them credit for being. But that's not to say that once they are breached, things won't then crumble, or that it might be quick after that. But it's just getting to that moment of finding the weakness in the defenses right across that Zaporizhia front, and before being able to then breach them. How much do you lose in those opening exchanges until you find that weakness, and exploit it, or multiple weaknesses? And I think that's where we're at the moment, which is why you then have the ISW reporting that Ukrainian forces may be temporarily pausing counteroffensive operations to reevaluate tactics. The ISW quoted the head of the Estonian Defense Forces Intelligence Center, Colonel Marko Grosberg, who said on June the 16th that we won't see an offensive operation by Ukraine over the next 7 days. Now, is that true? I don't know. It's June the 19th now. It's 3 days later, and we are seeing offensive activities taking place. So that is arguably already incorrect. Is it psyops? Is it X? Is it Y? I don't know. But that is what has been said by the Estonian intelligence services there. So during the last 2 weeks, says Hanya Malyar, the deputy defense minister, 8 settlements were liberated, and then names them all. Ukrainian units advanced 7 kilometers deep into enemy territory. Total area was liberated was in the south 113 square kilometers. There are claims. I mean, I'm going to read you what Kenneth Gregg says here. The Finnish fighter in the area as a kind of summary of what's going on the front line. So we're moving to the front line area now. Take his claims with a pinch of salt, but it actually is quite a useful little summary. This morning of June the 18th. Right now there is. So this is yesterday. There is very little information coming from the fronts. What I reported last night has been officially confirmed. Actually, this is Kenneth Runt, who does the kind of PR for this guy, has combined 2 updates into one. So this isn't just the morning of the 18th, it's a secondary one as well. People are beginning to give up hope of a quick offensive, so let me provide some facts. At Makarivka, so that's in the Velika Novosilka area, we have beaten back the Russian counterattack and advanced on the flanks. We have about 13 kilometers to their main line, and the whole area is full of mines. That's 13 kilometers by 100 kilometers. So we are now demining corridors. This is why it's taking a long time. So this is why I thought it'd be interesting to read you what he says. We are now demining corridors in several places with Soviet material and so-called mine worms. We are working as fast as we can, and when we have enough corridors, the Western heavy vehicles will come. This is an important job and must be done properly. Nobody wants us to end up in the same situation as the Russians at Vuhledar. Also, we work mostly at night because the Russians lack night vision equipment. At the same time, we take out the Russian surveillance systems, both in front and behind their defensive lines. We also continuously hit their hubs with success. Each hub we knock out reduces their ability to effectively hit our positions. That's what we've seen previously. Today, unfortunately, the Russians are now receiving more and more drone deliveries from Iran. And then he said later that day, yesterday, time for the latest front update with interesting data. We are advancing in a new location, namely south of Novodanilivka, which is near Robotina. I'll show you this in a second. We have recaptured an area 6 kilometers wide and 1 kilometer deep. Moreover, our operation is still in progress at Makarivka. As I said earlier, demining is ongoing, and the Russians have changed their 80th Brigade to the 60th. At Vuhledar, north of Mikilska, we have shrunk the infected area, which means we have started to move. By far the most pleasing news comes from Avdiivka. We have advanced on a line that is 4 kilometers wide and 1.5 kilometers deep. This has taken place at Vesele, and it is the Chechens who are taking the beating, and I reported that yesterday. Let us then go to the north of Soledar, where we attacked with success. So this is north of Bakhmut. The Russians are forced towards Soledar. This happened at Rozdilivka and is in progress. Further to north, it is quiet. And the Russians are using artillery along the entire front line, but no major hits on our positions have been reported. Um, our strategy right now seems to be to advance along a wide a 1 to 1.5 kilometer deep line. Then we stabilize the captured area, clear out the Russians. This provides a stable base for the next attack. In other words, it's kind of incrementally taking bites out of the Russian territory, done slowly method method methodically, not methodologically, methodically. So, yeah, this could be why we are seeing slow advances because it's more methodical than lightning. But that's what we were saying before this counteroffensive started. It was going to be like Kharkiv. So now talking about the front, so just to give you some idea of where this is, you've got Vuhledar over to the east there, and it goes into a corner and up into Donetsk eastern front line, comes down here, and then as we go west from there, you come to south of Holaypole, south of Orikhiv, and then across to the reservoir. So Rivnepil, which is this town just there. Let's see if we can. Why is it not? Rivnepil should be there as far as I. Oh no, it's there. Duh. So Rivnepil. Rivnepil is reported as abandoned and yet not confirmed under Ukrainian control. Fighting continues. They're going to have to clear it. They'll be mined, heavily mined. They've fought over Rivnepil quite a bit, but that is quite significant. That would be a significant gain. Fighting continues east of Urozhainy, so that's here, and there on the way to Novodonetsk. Fighting on the borders of the village. Initial reports of Ukrainian activity east of Levadny. So Levadny is here, east of there, is on towards this Priyutne village that has been, I think, hammered by aerial bombardments and whatnot. And then on the Avdiivka axis, so as we, I hate it when I do that. Quickly, so the Vasilivka axis, so this is by the, as you can see, to the west there, by the reservoir. Pietikatki is confirmed under Ukrainian control. Fighting reached the outskirts of Zerebyanki, which is a village near it, and the Ukrainians are attacking Luhova, which is a village to the south. West there, east of Pietikatki, there are early reports of the Ukrainians increasing their positions. So a lot of activity going on around Roberturna there, just south of Orikhiv. That is the area that your man Kenneth Gregg was talking about, that there is Novodanilivka area is there. And then Avdiivka axis, according to Deep State, the AFU managed to take up advanced positions near the small Vasily, north of Avdiivka. No visual confirmation yet. Separately, there were reports of increased fighting near Kamyanka over the last week. So the Ukrainians are possibly advancing in that area. And in Bakhmut, fighting is still raging north and south of Bakhmut. But the intensity has decreased slightly. The AFU holds position and tries, where possible, to advance. The task of the troops here is mainly to exhaust Russian reserves. I thought that was an interesting observation because that's exactly what I've been saying. The job there is to attrit them, to fix and attrit them, rather than to actually take territory. So there you go. That is what's happening there. And just to let you know that heavy battles happening south of Balka, Uspensnivska, nature reserve. Ukrainian forces took an important height in the area recently, and that's the Novodanilivka that Kenneth Gregg was talking about, and that's on the way to Roberturna. So you're going to see these places, Kopani, Roberturna, and Verbova, in the news quite a bit. I think this is where there will be quite a lot of activity over the next few days if their counteroffensive continues, rather than taking an operational pause. Okay, let's move on to military aid and other sorts of aid for the Ukrainians and indeed Russians. Now, I love it where you find a bit of information and then you see it completely confirmed somewhere else as well. So I was listening to Perun's video on procurement, on military equipment procurement, which was as ever fascinating. Always check out Perun's videos on YouTube. They come out every Saturday and they are brilliant. So he's talking about, and this is only a tiny part of the video, just almost like not quite a throwaway set of comments, but he's saying that you are now going to start seeing, or we are starting to see, nations get together and do procurement together with other nations in order to bring down, so the more stuff you buy. So if I'm going to buy 10 tanks, right, then the the people who are making those tanks are going to have to spread their R&D costs and whatever over just 10 tanks. Say if they only ever sell 10 tanks, if they get an order for 1,000 tanks, then all of that R&D costs and production setup costs will now spread over 1,000 tanks. So the more you order, the less the unit cost of each will be. Okay, that's just your basic economics. But also you get economies of scale, such that by making more of them, the unit costs come down as well for other reasons. Just economies of scale, right? So if you're going to get together with other nations, so rather than me as Czechia saying, well, do you know what, I want 10 Leopard 2A8s, right? And Rheinmetall go, okay, that's going to cost this much, then that's going to be pretty expensive. But if I can come to you and say, well, I've got together with Sweden and Poland, and we're going to buy 200 Leopard 2A8s, then my 10 out of that 200 are now going to be much cheaper. In other words, it's much better if nations get together. So we started to see this I talked about this yesterday, with the Nordic nations starting to work together with their air forces and so on and so forth. Well, here we have Sweden, Czechia, Slovakia, and Ukraine getting together. So the MODs of those four nations have signed a declaration on cooperation in procurement and operation of CV-90 infantry fighting vehicles. So Czechia is buying 246, Slovakia 152, and Ukraine wants 1,000 of them after receiving 50 from Sweden. Part of the manufacturing will take place in Czechia. In other words, so state Slovakia would have previously gone to buy 152 and been charged at that order of 152. They're now part of an order of like 1,500 of these bad boys, almost, or 1,400, and they get to benefit from having a much, you would assume, much lower unit cost for each of their 152. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting that I listened to Prun's video, took that on board, and then literally like half an hour later I come across that. I'm like, oh, there you go. Anyway, moving on. More than 200 Merkava Mark II and Mark III tanks. So these are the Israeli tanks we've heard a lot about recently, which Israel is going to sell to other countries for the first time. So they don't usually sell stuff like this, are probably destined for Poland and Ukraine. This is reported by the Israeli publication Walla with reference to Polish military experts. It was known that the amount of the contract reaches several tens of millions of dollars, the funds from which will go to the budget of the Ministry of Defense for Israel. So this is, I wonder whether there's a lot of countries looking at basically the money other defense corporations are making. So this war, aside from anything else, aside from the morality and the politics of it all, there will be defense manufacturers that are making a pretty penny out of this. It's just the nature of the beast. So there'll be other, I was talking about this with regard to Switzerland and their neutrality, and in a sense here, Israel as well, not wanting to sell their stuff otherwise and keep close control over their stuff. We're actually going, goodness me, they're making an absolute packet, and they will then, going forward, be able to be in a better position to sell their stuff again and again as people get to know their stuff, and they become this big player on the global market and everyone's knowing about them and they're in the news. Well, we want a piece of that. So in order for us to have a piece of that, then we need to get in on this whole game here. So I don't mean game in any other way. Sorry if that's the wrong word to use here, but the point is that there will be corporations from other countries who won't normally get involved with this sort of thing, thinking, well, actually it's now or never. If we want a sustainable business model going forward, then we need to be getting involved in the war in Ukraine and trying to provide material for hopefully Ukraine rather than Russia, obviously. The Ukrainians themselves here, OTRK Sapsan is 70% ready today. So what is that? Well, it's basically the Hrim 2. So the Hrim 2 is their Thunder missile that has been used a number of times. The original Sapsan version of missile for Ukraine's own use was to have a 500-kilometer range. The later Hrim 2 version, developed for export, has a range of 280 kilometers in order to fall within the 300-kilometer set by the missile technology control regime, which seeks to limit the proliferation of missiles and missile technology. Well, now there's this talk about this. I don't know whether it's the launch. Yeah. Ihor Kroll, the head of the Western Ukrainian Association of Defense Industrial Complex Enterprises Association, according to him, the complex, so it's going to be the whole piece of kit, will have a range of 400 kilometers or and more. In other words, they're looking like they're taking that missile back to what it was originally designed to be, which is a missile that has a range of 500 k's. That kilometers, that would be really useful if they can have an indigenous production. Of course, during war, how many of these could they produce? But there's 70% to completing this system, and that would give them the ability to strike really deep into Russian territory. I mean, they could then use these to strike into Russia, because this would be indigenously made stuff, and they wouldn't have these contractual obligations from these other nations that they can't use. For example, the Storm Shadows to hit within Russia, they can't use. If they've got ATACMS, you can't use them to hit inside Russia. We made these can, and then you're thinking, whoa, 500 kilometers, into Russia. That's a really interesting scenario. Right. Mock-ups of the S-300 and S-400 air defense system launches have been spotted in the USA. This is really fascinating. So a bunch of these, which appear to be completely fake, have been built. Obviously, very good looking decoys, and been built in the US. And evidently, I would assume, not evidently, but I assume these are going to be sent to Ukraine to act as decoys for the Russian loitering munitions and so on and so forth. Right. Russia, on the other hand, have had a look at the Ukrainian naval drones that we've seen in action in the Black Sea and around Sevastopol, and they've made their own. Apparently, Russian engineers in Sevastopol have copied the Ukrainian maritime drones, and the Russian design is much smaller and less capable. Interesting that they are so influenced by the Ukrainians, though. So that I don't know. I mean, all I'm seeing is a picture there. I don't know whether this is fully operational, whether this is still in the design stage, so on and so forth. So lots of unknowns there. Right, geopolitics, not a lot to say on geopolitics. In fact, this article, I'm going to say for my extra, it's more of a discussion piece, but Georgians dream of EU membership as their leaders move closer to Putin. So Georgia's a very strange country by point of fact that it's got these areas like South Ossetia here annexed, that could be where those Russian troops from the 300 who are supposedly surrounded in Pyatikatki, I think were from a South Ossetian unit. But anyway, this is, Georgia is wanting to join NATO, wanting to join the EU, but has a government, the Georgian Dream, who ostensibly were pro-EU and technically are pro-EU, but they're positioning themselves closer and closer to Russia as time goes on. So there's lots to discuss in here. Really interesting piece, this. You get a chance to read it, go for it. It's in the Guardian, called Georgians Dream of EU Membership as Their Leaders Move Closer to Putin. It covers quite a lot of different ground there. We'll discuss that later. And then the last thing to say, so there's not a lot of geopolitical news, to be honest. Chinese Bank of China has restricted currency transfers from Russia to banks in the European Union, USA, Great Britain, and Switzerland. So I need to look into this to see, as this person says, what does this mean, really? I don't know if this is them towing the party lines with regard to sanctions, actually, in order to not get themselves into hot water with Western financial institutions and governments. So this could be good news for Ukraine, but I need to look into that in more detail. That there might not be some weird way of being beneficial to Russia. You guys can let me know if you have any greater knowledge on that than I do. Anyway, that's today's news. Sorry, it's another chunky one. Please like, subscribe, and share. Do all the hitting bells and blowing whistles. I really appreciate all your support. I'm going to be talking later to Andrew Perpetua on doing a frontline update, and I was wondering whether to do my own frontline update today, or just to wait, because otherwise I'd be doubling up. Look, I'm probably going to do a frontline update again just after this, because it just sorts my mind out, and I then know where I am, because I'm going to have to do the work anyway to do the mapping, so I might as well talk about it. So you don't have to watch everything I do. There'll be a lot of content out today. You don't have to watch it all, but I will be doing a live stream with Andrew Perpetua. It'd be great if you come along to that. Anyway, take care. I'll speak to you later.